Welcome to Healthy Conversations, sharing the knowledge, experience, stories, and the wisdom of herbalists and other natural healers, with your host, Stephen Horn. Today's guest, Denny Johnson. Hi, and welcome to Healthy Conversations. I am deeply honored today to have with me Denny Johnson, who I first heard in 1986 when I learned about his Rayid method of looking at the eyes. And I have to say, I could count on one hand the number of people who have not only influenced me greatly in my work as trying to help people to be healthy, but has influenced me personally. And Denny would be right in that list as one of the most influential teachers I've ever dealt with. And I really appreciate you joining with me.
So with that said, any other miracles we'd like to pull off?
Well, let's just start with the fact I heard you in 1986 and you introduced the Rayid model, and you talked about some different like personality types that you could, identify from the eye, the flower, jewel, stream, shaker. Tell us a little bit about the story of how that came about.
Goodness. So we would need a considerable period of time to talk about how that came about. But just say it was an unusual experience in my late 20s where I had the experience of the iris as a mirror of the soul. So I got inflamed with the opportunity to express the meaning and purpose of it. And the iris to me is far more than the iris, for example. So the iris is somewhat of a hologram of the whole body. So the hand, the face, the eyes, the whole physical body is all reflected down to the minutia. And now I see the same pattern in all of nature around me, cycles and seasons, solstice, equinox, eclipses even. All of these are the same hologram of what I see in the iris.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a variety of different ways that I go into the iris. And to go in there for myself, I see each iris as basically a model of the divine made in a specifically unique way for that person.
Mm-hmm.
So every person has something completely, totally unique that no other person or no other soul has in exactly the same way.
Kind of like
So every
all
iris is something completely unique.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things that was so beneficial to me in hearing you was prior to that time, kind of our ideology that I've been introduced to. There were like good irises and bad irises, and people who had healthy constitutions, healthy. But I really came to see from you that all irises were beautiful, because each soul has its own unique lessons and challenges and life journey that it's going to be taking during this existence.
Yes. So for me, the iris, each and every iris is perfect in its origin, what I sometimes call the genetic blueprint of perfection. But it has on top of that perfection an ancestral accumulation of tiny crystals. You can think of them as epigenetic protein tags. And it's memories from our ancestry that now also overlay that blueprint of perfection. And then those ancestral memories, they cloud up the ability of the person to be able to completely respond in their original endowment. So I try to find the original endowment and talk to that part.
It's kind of like the homeopathic idea of miasms, right? That there's something that can be passed down from the people who came before us that we inherit, right?
Yes.
In
Yes.
terms of what I think of as potential strengths and weaknesses, because I like Emerson's idea where he says every liability has a hidden strength and every strength has a hidden liability. So
Yes. And I feel the same way. So
yeah,
every single position or every single constitution has natural strengths and natural weaknesses. I just like to identify the natural ability of the person for another reason, not just to appreciate who they are, but my understanding is if I can identify, appreciate, relate to, and have a genuine, sincere experience with that person or that soul, then I also get to learn that line or that attribute that they're contributing into my own life. So every one of them is what I call a different vector. So there's different vectors from the mother's side, different genetic contributions, different vectors from the father's side. There are universal archetypal patterns, and then there are all the unique ones. So I want to learn not only the archetypal ones, but also the unique ones.
One
So
of the
after,
things, yeah, one of the things that really made a difference in my life from hearing you is when you talk about the different types, we're not here to do a class on it, but the stream, flower, jewel, shaker, all of them perceive the world a little differently. They don't
yes,
we don't all perceive the world the same way. And we have this idea that other people are seeing the same thing we're seeing. And I figured out that wasn't true. You know, that people are experiencing the world through a different filter, if you will. And that's made me fascinated at really trying to get to know people and try to understand how they're seeing the world differently from the way I'm seeing the world.
and not only are they seeing it differently, but the synthesis of how the two of you could see it together
Aha.
actually accelerates something for both of you. So there's an advantage in learning how to experience and feel and in some way acknowledge the unity with that other unique soul and come up with a wilder version of something completely new.
Yes, because even in studying business, a successful business integrates many different types of people. I mean, some people are really good at details and managing the books, and other people are really good with people and being friendly and in front of the audience, and other people are more managerial. And so it takes many of different kinds of personalities working together to create a better success than any one of us could do on our own.
Yeah, so I have the same thing inside me. So I have all of my mother's genetic contributions, and far more than genetics, by the way, because there's a lot of things the DNA do not actually contain, other than the phenotype and a few other parts of it. But my mother's side is my left side of my body, my father's side is my right side of my body, and they came together to have an attempt to be able to do that. Now,
Yes,
all of
so
that's true for all of my grandparents and great grandparents. They all tried to have some kind of union in some way or another. So there is a vastly fragmented psyche inside of me that if I come back and seek to join it back together again, might be able to do far more than I ever thought possible. So
yeah, and
that's what my goal is.
yeah, and it influenced the way I saw when I started working with people emotionally, emotional healing. I saw them as carrying inner conflicts from the places where people in their family tree had not been able to resolve their differences or learn to work harmoniously together, and that
Yes.
had was now operating inside of them. Like maybe there's one side of your family that's really playful and maybe a little bit irresponsible, and the other side is workaholic. So somewhere inside you, you have this conflict between um, work and play that you are having a hard time figuring out how to find the right balance and synthesis between those things.
Yes.
Is that similar to what you've seen?
Yes, that's all there. And but in the Rayid system, it's also more than the iris. So I use the iris as the beginning, the first of several lenses I look
Uh-huh.
through. Because one of them is your iris constitution, which we could describe what a different iris constitution might look like or act like, but that's all modified by a family birth order line, which to me is a methylation line. That just means where did you acquire most of the influences that affect your conscious personality. So how do you do that? We do that called birth order. So that's about your gender sequence that leads you to a particular line in your mother or your father's family. And upon that line, you have its and capacities or weaknesses. So iris, birth order are two lenses that we combine together to more accurately define the vector or the line of that person's path.
And that's one of the things that I found very interesting when I went to your class on birth order, about how working with those lines actually helps with healing. I mean, it's a profound thing to think that we're not just us, but we're also hooked into this family dynamic that
Yes.
we're trying to resolve in some way.
I think resolve is a wonderful thing to do, but there's also the utilization of the opportunity of this coherent friction or polarization to give us the opportunity to grow more or feel more. It's just, can we learn to access it and use it in a loving, harmonious way, or do we project it and create a problem for subsequent generations?
Yeah. So what we're not able to work through in the harmony, I don't know, whatever, the healing inside of ourselves, then it can go through us into our posterity and continue on.
The bad news, Steve, it already has,
Already
and
has, yes.
it's passing down through the generations as we speak, and it's already set up for the future great grandchildren that are not maybe even conceived or thought of yet. The matrix is already in place.
And that is such a fascinating thing to me. And I know it's true because I've encountered it firsthand in working with people, trying to help them work through their mental and emotional trauma. You often find that it's something that runs through their family in some way. And I've seen that with abuse, both physical, sexual, emotional, with suicide. We know alcoholism does that. We know that there's a lot of things that tend to, I don't know if we call family junk that's
Yes.
that we're dealing with, right?
Well, okay, let's just offer the listeners something useful,
Right,
something to be able to use, right?
right.
And I would suggest that you just maybe make a wall map or a piece of paper if you want, and you put one little triangle down that represents a father and a circle that represents mother. And then likewise with your grandparents, another circle, another triangle. Likewise with your great grandparents. And now you have a total of 14, including your parents. But now you've identified the 12 primary vectors or areas of the entire iris or the entire family tree. All the glands, all the organs, all the body systems are inside those 12 being expressed through your mother and your father. I know that sounds strange that your great grandparents are having a current contribution to your happiness, your well being, your success, your libido, whatever it is, they're all influencing it. One of the remarkable things is to use, the magic words. So let me give you the best magical, well, some of the best magical words.
Some of the best magical
I'll
words.
give a few.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, those are the magic words. So
Yeah. I agree.
if I say thank you to my mother's mother's mother, for example, and by the way, I would suggest you go to the mother side first, which for reasons I could explain. But if you go over to the mother's mother's mother, pause for a moment, have some sincerity and desire, and just say thank you for being my great grandmother. You never got a chance to know them, feel them, experience them, being held by them. But going there, meaningfully saying, thank you for what you have contributed to my existence, known or unknown, to my body, my life, my mind, my feelings, my opportunities. Thank you. And if you go through the 3 grandmothers out of those 3 on your mother's side of the family, with back into the great grandparents, your mother's mother and your mother's father's mother,
Mm-hmm.
then you have the 3 grandmothers on your mother's side of the family, and you say thank you to all 3 of them. Now, the interesting thing about that is that opens a gate. It actually opens a series of gates. The easiest way to get a feeling of that is to look at the times of the day. So, a third lens on the model of Rayid is we call cycles and seasons.
Hmm.
Cycles.
Right.
So, one of those cycles is a progression of a day. Grandmother, mother's mother, corresponds to sunset and the peace of the evening and that beauty of the light that most of us really enjoy, the songs of the birds and the movement of animals, that quality of the feeling of the moonlight coming, the softening, the quieting, the undergoing, corresponds to the feeling, the universal feeling of that grandmother. Whether or not she was able to achieve it can dampen your own ability to access it, but saying thank you, grandmother, actually begins to dissolve her personal contributions that were not helpful so that you can access and begin to restore the universal quality of peace, which has a series of other qualities to it as well. Her mother is that great grandmother, mother's mother's mother. That's the second gate. The other grandmother, mother's father's mother, is the third gate. And there are three gates in the body, three gates in the energy field of the etheric and astral functions. So, how do we open those gates? Well, the easiest thing I could say is always make it a person. So if I said, yeah, I love peace, I really love peace, I love the peace of the evening, which is useful to some degree. But when we realize that that quality to actually experience or sense that time of the day is related to an actual person that once lived, that's coded in my DNA inside of me. And if I take that one person out and I go, thank you, grandmother, for giving me everything you could, that one starts to move. But if I just use a concept called peace, which is really a nice thing to have anyway, it's not related to a person. Now, as odd as that sounds, we're composed of people, mother and father,
Actually,
their parents.
I know that for some of our listeners, this is deep stuff. Okay, if you don't fully understand it, just hearing it for the first time, I'll be doing some work with Danny to get some other additional information out to help you understand it better. But I have experienced this firsthand. I know what he's saying is true. I've seen this connection work. You just did it with my wife, and she had a profound experience with her one of her great grandfathers that just brought about an amazing change in her. And I've seen it work with other people that I've worked with emotion. I know when I went to your class, you told a lot of very interesting stories that still stick in my brain about, that very, very process. And so I think sometimes, and the reason why I wanted to talk about this just briefly with you to kind of introduce the listeners to it is we don't realize that it's not just us. We're connected into a bigger whole where we're like all the cells in the body are connected to other cells, right? We're connected to a greater thing with other people. And that is part of the healing process. It's not just healing ourselves, but healing those relationships that we have to bring greater light. And I don't know, and gratitude is one of what I call the three magic reset buttons.
Excellent.
It resets the consciousness when you start becoming grateful for something.
Yes, and there's lots of reasons about how that works energetically relative to the heart and so on. But back to the iris for a moment. Iris is actually my favorite because there's nothing else I've found that is so distinctly accessible as looking in someone's eyes. I mean, even from a distance, in a conversation, we have a tendency to look at other people's eyes. And so in a consultation and or a self-discovery process, I like to look and compare the left eye, mother's family, right eye, father's family, and look at the contributions that they gave the person that I'm speaking with. It's a profound experience because it now corrects my perception of seeing their face and their body type, where I actually get to see the constitutional framework. And then you find out body types and outer expressions are not always true, because our constitutional pattern is universally true, but there's so much damage in the way. Structural difficulties, mental difficulties, we are like barnacles on a whale. They can, weigh you down and slow you down until you slowly take them off. So that's what I like the iris about, is how to identify first, what is this genetic blueprint of perfection that this person is capable of, whether they even know it or not. But if I go in there and I look and I start to just talk to them about the possibility, it's ringing the bells in there somewhere, and it's kind of beginning the process of helping it be accessible. And then if I say, well, did you know your father's father? People listening, well, they might or might not know their father's father because their father was abandoned, he lost his father, whatever reason. Your father's father is responsible for helping you access passion, purpose, movement, athleticism, and a whole series of other qualities that are really most accessed on the yang or masculine side of the family. So father's father adds a sense of mobilization or force or fire. But that feeling of that place universally is bird by sunrise. So sunrise is an arriving fire passion, right?
Right. It's moving from
Sunset.
the night, which is the yin, the associated with the feminine, the moon, the lunar, and the day, the
Yes.
sun, which is the masculine. And so you're transitioning from the feminine to the masculine, and the other side is transitioning from the masculine into the feminine, right?
Yes. So your mother's mother is cooling down, but mirrored to that, father's father is the heating up.
Uh huh.
And you can go all the way through the family tree and you find out that there are these very distinct places that simply going over to, in your own quiet way, your father's father, and even if he's still alive, regardless of his condition, healthy or not, you go over and give him a heartfelt thank you. And without realizing it, you're also in the midst of being able to forgive anything that may have come through him based on his own denial or escapism or addiction, that you can begin to do a release through that gratitude. And then later on, you can actually build the universal quality in that location, because most likely your grandfather never really got a chance to be able to develop it himself.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we have to access that place, clean it off, and build it back into its long-term benefit.
So we're talking about the idea here that there are universal archetypal energies
Yes.
that manifest in cycles and seasons through our body, through our life, etc.
And throughout the day.
And throughout the day, and some of them are clouded, obscured, obstructed, however it is.
All of them.
Okay, all of them are in some way, so we're not able to fully experience that aspect of being alive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the result of that is displayed as body symptoms.
Yeah. So this is one thing I learned from after I learned the constitutional iridology, which is about the idea that the iris is genetic. And at the same time, I learned what you said. And I started studying irises. I started to realize that it is the energetic that ultimately leads to a physical manifestation or a physical symptom of that
Yes.
problem. On the Rayid thing, for example, the heart. The heart has an aspect of commitment, right? Like being connected and bonded to someone, right? And so if there's a heart problem in your family tree, you may have a hard time committing to someone, being loyal. You may wander around from one relationship to another, right? That's
Yes.
one of the aspects I learned, right?
Yes.
And that actually can contribute to you developing heart disease.
Yes.
Right. And
So,
that connection between the mind, soul, body, whatever you want, is very real and very important to understand.
okay, you brought up the heart, so let's use it for a moment.
Yes.
Because this just happens to be in the cycle of a year. This happens to be the second month of spring. The date of this recording is the second month of spring.
Right.
The second month of spring is also the heart. But the second month of spring is the robust yang side of the heart. Hence, it is an outbound, the trees are growing, the birds are singing, fertility, and all
The
of this is
flowers are
happening.
blooming, Mayflowers.
Everything is going Yahoo Yang,
Yep.
right? This is the season of the year that goes into an upwelling and outpouring, like the yang side of the arterial function of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also on an emotional level, gladness, celebration, friendship, and even fraternal love and many other very beautiful things from the outbound function of the heart. That's related to father's father. It's three forms of yang in a row. So it's you and your father's father, and so on to your great grandfather. On
Mm-hmm.
the other side is the great grandmother we referred to, and she's the yin of the heart, the capacity to receive the blood back to the heart and receive the dead cells through the spleen, cleaning through the spleen, and cleaning through the lungs and all the things that the left side of the heart does. And bring me your old tired blood, let's clean it up a little bit, give it to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So these two sides of the heart,
the part of the heart that receives the blood and the part of the heart that sends the blood, right?
yes. So one of them is a great grandmother on the mother's side that maybe you never knew. Most of us didn't. I didn't. And the other one is another great grandfather on the father's side, and they correspond to 4 and 4. Now we have a 3 and 3, and we have a 2 and 2, and we have a 1 and 1, and we have a 5 and 5, and we have a 6 and 6. So we have, like a ladder, we have 6 rungs going across. And they're all connected to glands and organs and body systems, and they're all composed of people. Always about people.
That's very interesting. In other words, it's about people and our connection to people.
Yes, it's always about people. It's always nice to see symbols of nature, like the symbol of the volcano or the fire, but that also corresponds to passion and purpose. But in the body, it's also blood.
Mm-hmm.
The blood is the passionate experience of moving through the arterial expression, circulating through the whole body and coming back to the heart again. That's a blood manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also the manifestation of the water, the kidney, the bladder, things that mobilize and release, and the bowels and all of that clean. One side cleans and the other side builds. People, and people. I know this is slightly annoying because there's certainly been times in my life where, quite frankly, I don't like many of them. Right.
Right.
And
right.
then they come out and go, wait a second, I really need to learn to appreciate and like people a little more. And so I'm practicing more in my later years than I might have in my youth.
Yeah, well, that is, I think, the one of the core lessons in this whole thing is that, from my understanding, the universe is built on love.
The universe is built on love, yes.
And I kind of learned this idea that when I house animosity or don't like certain people, it's because there's something inside of me that I need to work on. That there's something inside of me that prevents me from seeing them through what I think of as God's eyes, the eyes of love that God sees us all through. So it's a reflection that there's something in me I need to work on. So I've often said a prayer when I don't like someone: God, help me to see them through your eyes instead of through mine, and understand what it is inside of me that and it prevents me from having a loving feeling towards them.
Yeah. So yes, for me, what breathing is to the inspiration of the body,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to live and breathe, the currency in the divine spectrum is love. So the constant circulation of our capacity to respirate in the physical world, which has a pulse, from my understanding, the divine world is not a pulse, it's an emanation or a radiance. So
Mm-hmm.
our degree of our ability, like the rheostat on a light, we can either turn it up with a higher degree of love or leave it down where we acquired it, which sometimes isn't the highest of the illumination.
Right?
So we're still learning how to do that.
Yeah, we are, and it's a lifelong pursuit.
It is a lifelong pursuit. And this is why, even though I've done the iris for more than a few decades, I, I never tire of looking at an iris because this is something I've never seen before. In a unique
Yeah.
way, this iris represents a tiny aspect of an infinity of the divine quality. And if I can just learn to see, feel, grasp, have compassion for, and at times get over my reaction to or my repulsion of. I mean, there are certain political candidates that I have certain reactions to, and and you realize that this has gone on generation after generation. If it's not a political party, it's a religion. If it's not a religion, it's a race. If it's not a cultural or an economic problem, and all this polarity going on, all of this polarization serves to block our capacity to increase our degree of love.
Yeah. One of the things I've kind of had a personal revelation is if you think of all of us as like cells in a greater body, if you look at our own body, which I think is a reflection of this, we have a whole bunch of cells that have a whole bunch of different qualities to them, that do different things, that are all organized differently with different talents and different abilities and so forth. And our health is based on the ability of those different organs, tissues, cells, and structures to work harmoniously together.
Yes.
And we, as human beings, are having to learn to do the same thing with each other as the whole of humanity.
Yes.
We don't exist apart from that. I mean, I can't produce everything I need to survive, to live, to be part of this thing. It's a vast network of people that's doing this. And to me, to learn to live harmoniously with others who maybe have a very different point of view than me, or maybe even a little antagonistic or whatever, or things that I maybe get caught up in that conflict, it's because we're not seeing the greater whole, and we're not recognizing we're all interconnected in some way. And that's why I say sometimes I've come to understand that when that's happening, it's a reflection not of them so much as it is what's going on inside of me that makes me not be able to love, appreciate, or understand that other person who is part of this greater whole.
Well, I suggest that we might leave them something to consider.
Okay, let's do that.
Go back
Wrap
to
this
the
up.
iris.
Yeah.
We end up, I start out with all irises. First, I bring, like a little teeter totter, 100% of the irises are either what I call a jewel, which is a constrictive capacity to have an aware thinking mind as a display. And primary language of communication is auditory. And the other one is called a flower, and that's the magnetic side of an electromagnetic function. It's imagination, it's feeling. So I always determine, are you a jewel or flower first?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody falls into that same category. And if you're a flower, then there are 6 primary links in the family tree that are most predominant for you to feel. If you're a jewel, then there's another 6 that are the most predominant for you to feel. You have to eventually feel all of them, but through the stages of life, all of them will be presented. But before they're presented or as they're being presented, if you can go through them with a conscious desire to want to feel them and grow for a sincere purpose, it really accelerates the benefits of what you can arrive at before you're pushed into it by a polarized law of attraction event. So you can do that either way. So everybody has two sides. We have
Mm-hmm.
a mental side, we have an emotional side, we have a father side, we have a mother side. That's what I do with the iris. And then I put the other lens of the birth order on top of it.
So it goes back to a practical suggestion that we can end this on is what you said earlier. Make your little family tree and
Yes.
start on your mother's side and thank each one of these people for what they have brought to you.
Yes. And when you're ready, we have little charts available for people to be able to look at where it is. We show you the positive attributes from the mother's side and the father's side. And these charts are available for free. And you can look at them and then you can go, my mother's mother. No, this was not peace. She was a, difficult woman. No, she was an alcoholic and she used to have a shotgun and she would shoot cats or whatever. That wasn't my grandmother, but I've heard of grandmothers like that.
You're right.
You go, wait a minute, she isn't peace. That gives you the opportunity to accept what's good from her and dissolve what's unnecessary for you to take on. If you take on something and you perpetuate it with your own will, it's a whole nother class of issues. Mm-hmm. But if you have something that's coming toward you and you go, thank you, but I think I'll leave that addiction that you had behind. Mm-hmm. I get it. You had your own problems, so you had your reasons for shooting cats, but I don't want to continue that.
I'll take the good of what you brought to me and I'll let go of the rest.
We'll forgive what's unnecessary. And then you might even have one of the other very compelling things to offer your grandmother or great-grandmother. And probably it's the other side of gratitude is compassion. Your grandmother, your great-grandmother, all of them, they will benefit from just our compassion, even if we've never met them. So gratitude, thank you for what you've given me. Wow, I can't imagine how challenging your existence on Earth must have been during the 1800s, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that was my great-grandparents, was the 1800s. 1860 through 1890 was their primary time. It shows how old I am. There was a difficult time on Earth between 1860 and 1890, and they were all in that time period. So I can only imagine with my compassion, it must have been difficult. Now that's come down to myself, and if I perpetuate it, it's something else. Are we ending here, or?
Yeah. Well, I think we could wrap this up for everybody. Thank you, Dan. We will put in the links to this interview, how to connect with Denny and get some of the materials to learn more about this. So we'll put his website and connections that you can contact with him, learn more. Plus, we plan to get together again and maybe do some classes to teach people about this a little bit more. This is kind of like to whet people's appetite to say, hey, there is something here in healing that most people have never considered. And I think it's very important. Like I said, what I have learned from Denny has greatly helped me, not only in helping other people, but helped me as a person. I mean, help me learn how to deal better with what's going on inside of myself, try to manifest the positive side, and understanding a lot of things that just are incredible benefit in my life. So, Denny, I really thank you for all you've done and brought into this world. And we'll catch you again another time, okay?
All right, my friend.
Great.
Until next time. Bye-bye.
Yep, bye. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to catch future episodes of Healthy Conversations. Help us educate others by sharing this video, and please feel free to share your own thoughts, comments, and questions below. To learn more, check out the links below.